welcome to episode 16 of United City Randomiser. Episode 16 marks the start of season 3. I've just been through the transfer window in the summer. I've made loads of alterations to our squad, which we will get to during this episode. But if you remember last season, we were predicted to finish 17th, and in the end we finished a credible 13th, which I was very happy with. The board were happy with. So that meant that they gave me about a £9 million transfer budget for the summer transfer window and a little bit of extra wages. In the end, I spent about 7 million, just under 7 million, and the rest of it were transferred into the wage budget just for loans and free players. So I've reshaped the squad quite a bit in the transfer window. It's been quite a fun transfer window to figure out what I want to do. So far, we are currently on the 11th of September in the third season, and you can see here that we've played 2 games. We currently sit in our apparently favoured position of 13th again, but early days. We're predicted to finish 11th. I would hope for around a 10-11 spot for the final day of the season, hopefully, but we'll get to that as we move on. But yes, we currently played 2 games. We've got 2 draws, which sounds a little bit underwhelming until you realise that the first of the 2 draws was against Bayer Leverkusen, who were last season's champions, and the second of the 2 draws was against Hertha Berlin, who were 5th last season. So they were 2 really good, credible draws, a decent start. Although we didn't play magnificently, we were structured and we held the ball well, and it just meant that we got 2 very decent draws against 2 very hard oppositions. So if we go and look into what we did over the summer, I'll give you one guess as to on which particular game we had all of our stars available to us and our complete squad in place for the first time. Yep, it was the 8-0 win, obviously against weaker opposition as well, but you can see after that we played teams like Olympiacos and still got decent wins. So, that was really positive. There might be some names there that you haven't seen before that we'll get to. But it's been a really good pre-season. I'm very happy with how it's gone. So what are we going to do today? Well, I am going to introduce you to our new squad of players. And the simple way to do that, a bit different, is I've now got 2 players for each of these 11 positions of the way that we play, plus an extra wide man, plus an extra striker. So there's a 24-man squad. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the comparison page to compare each of the 2 players in our squad in each of these positions. So we're going to start off with the goalkeeper, and let's go and have a look at our squad. So here we are then, our 2 first team goalkeepers. Sten Greitbust was number 1 from last season, so you probably remember him. We got rid of Zentner. He wasn't happy and was not happy with his amount of game time, but he wasn't good enough for more than he got, really. So in the end, the best I could do for goalkeeping was I bought in a loan player, and that's Dean Henderson from Man United. You can see that each of them have got slightly different stats in terms of what they're good and not so good at, but they're both quite well-rounded goalkeepers. If we move through to the attributes, you can see some of the key stats of handling and one-on-ones and reflexes for Greitbust are strong. Reflexes for Henderson are strong. His distribution is better. Command of his area is better. Both in terms of mental stats are pretty good. Not outstanding, but pretty good. But Henderson has a better physicals, a bunch of physical ratings, which is positive for him. You can see, though, that they're fairly even, and what it will give us is a real opportunity to have 2 goalkeepers both vying for the number 1 spot, and both hopefully playing fairly regularly. I'll get on to how I want that to progress as the game progresses. But yeah, you can see they're 2 decent options at this particular level. Both have their better skills and their not so good skills, but they contrast each other enough to give us 2 really good viable options for this season. So that's our goalkeepers. Let's move on to our right back. So we've kept the same 2 right backs that we had last season. We had Nicholas Kruse and Lucas Klunter. You can see in the diagram here that they contrast each other quite well. Cruiser, in terms of the green, which is this one here, he's a better all-round player in the sense of his vision is good. Most of his stats are pretty good. He lacks a little bit of pace, but not too bad. But as a general attacking fullback, he's pretty decent. You can see in his stats, his crossing is at 15, his tackling is at 13. He's got work rate, his stamina is not too bad, natural fitness is quite good, acceleration is quite good. So he's got everything you need really to be an okay attacking fullback, which is what he played for us last season, and he did pretty well at it. So he'll continue in that role. Klunter, on the other hand, is a slightly different player in the sense that when I play him, he's obviously, you can see he's got better physicals, which is a positive. He's got some decent mental stats in terms of teamwork, etc., but they're not as good as I'd like them to be. But the key role for him is that he plays as a more defensive fullback option in some of my tactics. So things like his tackling is better, his crossing isn't so good. But he's got a contrast to Cruiser. So we've got one more attacking fullback and one more defensive fullback in the right fullback position, which is positive. Again, it gives us options, but they're both capable of coming in using their physical stats or their more sort of tactical-based positional stats to get decent performances out of them. So they will continue to fight for the right-sided berth. There you go. That's our right side. We'll go to the left side and look at our left fullback. So here we are at left fullback, our two players for left fullback. You can see that we've got one old player from last season and one new player. Florian Harthers is the new player. He'll come in primary as a backup to Heiss, but you can see in the diagram that they're both fairly similar to each other. So again, they can rotate in and out and it shouldn't cause too much of a problem. We bought Harthers, so he is ours. He's not on loan or anything. So that was a positive. And as I say, they're both decent enough and able to give us what we need. In terms of attributes, you can see that they're both fairly even across the board. Heiss has got better physical mentals, should I say. Probably you'd say that Harthers has got the better physicals. Both are fairly even in terms of their actual positional skills, so decent crossing on both, decent enough tackling on both. I might like that a bit higher, but not by much. Long throws, both of them are decent at, which is helpful. Determination's reasonable. Work rate is very, very good. Pace is the key one for both of these, that they've got both a decent amount of pace, which helps us on the wide areas to get up and down the pitch. Bravery's good. So yeah, you can see at this point in our save, as we're still progressing and trying to get better team players together, these are two decent enough left back options, and either one of them can play, and I don't think we would notice too much of a difference in the quality. But of course we'll check that out as we go along through the season. So that's our left back. Let's go and have a look at our right-sided central defenders. So here we are for our right-sided defenders. We have two right-sided defenders to choose from. I've tried to keep them all to their normal positions so they just get used to playing there and playing with the people that they're alongside. If we remember, at the back end of last season, Kenneth Omaru was a free transfer, so we already had him coming in. So I pointed out that he was coming in at the back end of last season, so he's new into the club, and so his alternative in this particular position on our team, and that's Mark Oliver Kempf, German player, which is positive to get as many German players as we can into the squad as well. You can see again, both players are fairly similar, well-rounded, decent options in terms of the defending position that we want them to play. So we're going to have a look at the stats and look a little bit more detail, but I think these two are really positive, and it might be long term as the season moves on, should I say, that maybe one of these transitions to the left side of central defence and they play together. It's possible. We'll just have to see how it goes. I'll talk about the left-sided players in a second, but you can see here they've both got really decent stats. Maybe Omaru, I'd like him to have a little bit more heading, but he's more of a cover defender, so he'll sit slightly deeper and let his left-sided defender partner go and attack the ball a little bit more, so it's not so important. But they've both got decent marking, they've both got decent tackling, the work rate's pretty strong. You can see, their bravery, their anticipation is pretty good. Determination could be a little bit better for Kempf, but not too bad. Physicals, Omaru has got the advantage there considerably, but there's nothing wrong with Kemp's stats really. His jumping reach for heading and clearing the ball is good. His pace is good. His strength is good. Those are key things that you really need as a central defender. And you can see that things like his teamwork are better as well. So they've both got decent stats. They're both 6'1". So one's a right-footed player, one's a left-footed. Again, that might mean that we play him on the left-hand side as the save goes on. But for now, these are the two options that we have on our right side of defence. And I think they're both really positive and decent potential to play well for us. So let's have a look at potential partners for these two who play on the left side of our central defence. So here's the left side of the central defence, the two that can play there. And they're both familiar to you in the sense that we had both of these last season, but there are a couple of things that I want to say about why they're here and what the purpose of this is. So first off, the reason that Tiru is potentially our first choice left-sided defender, central defender, rather than Kempf, is just because he played well for us last season, knows the club, has settled in, so he provides a good settled player for that particular role. If it might change that Kempf replaces him as the lead left-sided defender over the season, but we'll just have to play a bit and see how everybody gets on and who performs better ultimately. The second thing to say is there is obviously a gap in terms of David Sears-Leben's ability compared to our other central defenders, but it's still worth me trying to bring through some of our own internal young players into our squad, keep the German element as part of our squad, but also, as I say, try and improve what we've got in-house, because you never know when you might be able to produce a gem that will save you money in terms of having to go out and buy them. So he's nowhere near good enough to play too regularly, but he is good enough to have in the squad when we've got three strong central defenders around him that can all play. So that's why the two of them are in the position that they are. Here's the attributes. Again, you can see on this particular page where David Sears-Leben isn't as good as the others, but he's improving. The really big problem for him, really, and the thing that's slowed his progress down in terms of how I would like him to be, is his determination is dreadful, and that is really scuppering him. And I think it's probably the first time I've had a player like this that's got some decent enough original stats as an 18-year-old, but just isn't particularly improving because he can't be asked, basically. He's just not bothered. So it's disappointing in that respect, but we'll plug away with him this season, give him a few games here and there, see if we can up his stats a little bit. I'm not holding up too much hope, but he is worth having in the squad just because he's a homegrown player, he's a young player, and we're trying to develop them in our team as much as possible. But you can see that as with Kempf and with Omaru, Tiru has got pretty much everything you would need, really. I'd like a little bit more pace, maybe, but his mentals are good, determination is good, leadership is good, positioning is good, bravery is good, aggression, I don't really want him to be too aggressive, but he's got it. Tackling is good, marking is good, heading is good. So he's really useful as a central defender. And he may well switch round with Kempf as the season goes on, just because he's right-footed, Kempf is left-footed, so I'll probably move him to this left position. But I wanted to start with Tiru at the beginning of the season because he played well for me last season, and I just wanted that settled element. So it will probably shift, but there are our two left-sided central defenders for this season, and that completes the central defence. So let's move on to our holding midfield player. So these are our two holding midfield players, and all the eagle-eyed viewers out there that have been paying attention through the last couple of seasons will begin to notice a difference in terms of maybe how we're setting up and what the roles that people are having are. And the way that you see that in here is, obviously last season, partway through, we brought Lucas in, and he is really useful to us. He's a good leader as well as having good stats. But his best playing position was always the holding midfielder, but in a defensive, a deep-lying midfielder playmaker role. And last season we weren't playing him that because Burnich was playing that slightly ahead of him in terms of up the pitch into the midfield line. But the deep-lying playmaker role is what we're going to ask both of these to play whenever they play from the holding midfield role. So it's changed the way that we play slightly, but both of these are perfectly suited and would prefer to play as a deep-lying playmaker on the DM line. So this position here, it's their best role for both of them. Burnich we played in the midfield role last season and the season before that, and he did well for us, but his preference would still be to play it from here. Now that I've got some slightly better midfielders ahead of these two in terms of on this line, it means that I can put Burnich back into this position and play both of these as the deep lying playmaker. So you can see on the graph, Silva is a slightly better player in terms of his defending and his aerial and his attacking, etc. But Burnich is a perfectly good backup and has played well for us whenever we've asked him to. So in terms of stats, you can see that they are fairly even in terms of their stats in the first column. You can see that they've both got decent first touch, they've both got decent passing, tackling is fairly decent for both, technique is good. Physicals, again, there's no issue with them. They've got slightly different stats. You can see that determination and flair, Burnich has got a bit more of, but you look at Silva's positioning and teamwork and work rate are all high and strong. Composure for both is good. The actual physicals, I'd like a little bit better, but at this point you can't have everything. Silva's physicals aren't the best, but they do all right, and I haven't noticed that he struggles to do what I'm asking him to do. So, both of them cope physically, but maybe aren't the best. But yeah, these two, one right-footed, one left-footed, will rotate in and around the defensive midfield position, and they'll both play as the deep-lying playmaker. You can see that with passing and vision is good, they're going to be able to do that job no problem. So I'm really happy that these two are in this position. Burnich is still on loan. Hopefully, as that progresses, we might be able to get him in the next transfer window full-time, maybe, but we'll just have to wait and see on that one. I'm always looking at my loan players and seeing if I can make them permanent. Some work, some don't. But yeah, that's our holding midfield player, who is now the deep-lying playmaker. So let's move on to the right side of our central midfield. So here we are for our right-sided central midfield player. Two brand new players to the club. One bought in on a free, one as a loan deal. So the first person to talk about is El Neni, who his contract came up at Arsenal. He was on that particular situation for quite some time at the back end of last season. I was always checking in on him and making sure that nobody else was bidding on him that I didn't know about, etc. And at the end of the season, I put in an offer. A couple of other teams did, but my offer was good enough to secure his services for the next 4 years. And he is now my primary central midfield player in terms of obviously we've got a playmaker behind him, but he's going to provide an engine room and some quality in midfield to keep the ball transitioning well and getting up and down the pitch and supporting play. It says here that his best role is the deep line playmaker. Obviously we've got this position here playing that, so what he's going to be is more a generic central midfielder that can do lots of stuff for us in terms of how I set his individual tactical style to play. So he's quite well rounded and can do that for us, but it's a real step up in quality in terms of what we've had before. And his alternative in the midfield is Douglas Luiz, and we brought him in on loan for this season. He's again a fairly well rounded midfield player. He's got a box-to-box midfield role, which is best, and he'll probably play that role when he comes in and plays, getting up and down the pitch. So let's have a look at their attributes and see how they compare. I think they compare quite favourably in a way, but all the way through you can see that El Neni has got the better quality. Obviously, Douglas Luiz is a little younger, but nonetheless has got something to offer our squad. So El Neni, you can see his physicals are better. His mental stats are very good, very high. His teamwork and work rate, etc. That real core central midfield role that you need. Stamina is good. Natural fitness is good. So that's all encouraging. He's got decent tackling, decent enough passing. Long shots, first touch, they're all positive. So he's going to be a real help to our central midfield in terms of bringing up the quality. And for a midfield player that we bought in on a free transfer for the first time, you can see that we've really got some value in our players now. The value of our players is beginning to up as we progress. And so that's really positive that potentially we can sell some of these players when people come in and make decent bids for them and make decent money from some of these players now, whereas before we've had to get rid of people on free transfers and just releasing them because nobody was interested in the quality of player we were trying to get rid of. So not that we're trying to get rid of these players, but for future you can see that we've got an upturn in quality and therefore the upturn in terms of the value of the players. So yeah, that Douglas Luiz has got decent enough mentals and physicals. They're not brilliant, but they're not terrible. He's got a decent enough amount of tackling and passing and marking and long shots, etc., to play that box-to-box midfield role. His stamina is a little lower than I would really love it to be, but teamwork's good, so I think he can come in and do a job for us as a loan player for this season, and if he impresses, who knows, we might try and keep him on. But that's our two for the right-sided sort of central midfield or box-to-box midfield player. Let's go and have a look at the left-side midfield where we play the Metzala and see who we've got there. So these are the two players for our Metzala left-sided central midfield role. Two that you'll be aware of in the sense that Marin was at the club last season and did well for us. He didn't set the place alight, but he did well enough for us in the second half of the season, having brought him in January. But I hope that his progression will be obvious this season in terms of he's now settled into the club. So he'll play as the main Metzala. And his alternative, we mentioned at the back end of last season, because it's another of our free transfers that was... his contract had run down at his previous club, so I was able to get him for nothing, and he's come in as the alternative to Marin in terms of playing the Metzala role. You can see that they're both very similar in terms of what they offer us, both fairly well-rounded. As the Metzala, you don't really want them in the defensive area too much, they're more of an attacking threat, so you can see that that's what they both bring. They're both got everything I want in terms of a decent enough Metzala. So let's have a look at the stats that they've got. They might not blow you away in terms of how good they are necessarily, but they're decent, and it's a good stepping stone to maybe getting some slightly better players as we progress through the save. So you can see, as a Metzala, you want them to have a certain amount of quality on the long shot, because they're going to be on the edge of the area quite a bit, and they've both got that. They've both got decent enough passing. Their vision... yeah, Marin's isn't quite as good, but Agusa has got decent vision, so they can move the ball well round well. But Marin's mentals are not quite as good, but Agusa works there. But then Marin's physicals are better than Agusa. So again, they contrast each other slightly, but they balance well, and they can both play the position well that I want them to play, which is the Metzala from midfield on the left-hand side of our central midfield. So yeah, there's not much more to say about those two, but I think they're both decent options. That creates the core central midfield grouping. Let's move out to the wide right position and look at what we've got there. So here we are on our wide right, attacking midfield right. So it'll be this position here that they both play. We've got one winger, we've got one inside forward, we've got two new players. One is bought in, Hahn we bought, and Hadji is on loan, but they offer us good attacking options. You can see that because one's a winger and one's an inside forward, they offer slightly different things in terms of how their graph looks. Hahn is going to be our first choice. Hadji will attempt to replace him here and there. But yeah, decent upgrades on what we've had previously. Darday, who was on loan for a couple of seasons, really wasn't good enough anymore in terms of how our players moved forward. And Patrick Roberts, whilst played okay last season, didn't really set the place alight, didn't really offer me quite enough to want to continue on with him. So his loan ended and I decided not to go in and try and get him. I could have potentially bought him in because his contract was up potentially, but I think he signed a new one since then, but I wasn't interested enough. He didn't quite set the place alight enough for me. So these are the two options for the right hand side. Let's go and have a look at the attributes for them both, and you can see from the attributes that they're going to be playing the role differently. As I say, one's a winger, one's an inside forward. So let's look at Hadji first. His physicals are not the best. He's got a decent enough amount of pace. The rest are average at best. His mentals aren't too bad. He's got a leadership quality. He's got good determination. The rest are okay. In terms of the inside forward, he's got good free kick. His long shots are all right. His passing is decent. His technique is good. So, you know, he's got a little bit of flair. So he's going to probably play second fiddle most of the season, but he's a decent alternative and a decent inside forward alternative to the first choice option, which is Andre Hahn, who will play as a winger. So you can see for him, his physicals are very good. Natural fitness, pace, stamina is very good. Balance is very good for him running past players. Determination is really high. Aggression and bravery, not so bothered about them for the particular role he plays, but it's, you know, that's fine. Off the ball is good, so he's going to work well in terms of running into channels and stuff. Work rate is really high, which is really positive. His other stats, they're not the best, but he's got decent crossing. He's a threat from if we've got crosses coming in from the other side of the pitch, so he'll get a few headers maybe coming in at the back post. The rest of them aren't the best, but really as a wide player we want him to hug the touchline, dribble past people and put crosses in, which he's more than capable of doing. So those are our two options on the right. As I say, one playing the winger role, one playing the inside forward, one that we've bought in, one that we've loaned in. Let's go and have a look at the left hand side. So here we are on the left hand side, and you can see that there's been a little bit of a change, because in the green is always our first choice for that position now, and Bertram, for the last couple of seasons, who's done very well for us, is no longer in it. We have loaned in how would we pronounce that first name? Javiro Dilrosun. So we've loaned him in for the season, and he's a real upgrade on what we've got had previously. Bertram remains at the club. Hilsner is the other choice for the additional player on the left. His stats are not as good as Bertram now, let alone as good as Dilrosun, so you can see that he'll probably struggle a little bit for game time, and probably in the summer we'll look to replace him and try and bring a young guy in, maybe to play the real support role in the wide places. But these two are going to fight it out. But you can see already that Dilrosun is a real step forward in terms of the attributes that we've had so far. Both will play the winger role, both left-footed. Let's have a look at their attributes. And here you can see that while both are decent enough, the key things that Dilrosun has got are things like the crossing and dribbling and the flair over what Bertram has got. So he's a real upgrade in that sense. Physicals are both fairly good. The addition that Dilrosun has got there, of course, is a little bit more pace, but, you know, Bertram is perfectly adequate as a backup. In terms of the mental stats, neither are particularly amazing, but they've both got a decent enough amount of flair. Determination is good for Dilrosun, a little bit lower for Bertram, but fine. Work rate for Dilrosun is very positive, which is great to see. So he's gonna put in a shift. In terms of the other stats, this is where you get the slight improvement in terms of first touch and dribbling and crossing. Corners, both of them can contribute there, which is good. Bertram's long shot is slightly better if he ever cuts in onto his right foot, or finds a way to get a shot away on his left foot. Technique is better from Dilrosun. Passing, Bertram always struggled a little bit, but we've got a slight improvement for Dilrosun on the passing. But again, it's a little bit like Hahn on the other side. What are we asking these guys to do? We're asking them to use a bit of pace, bit of dribbling, bit of flair, to work past their defender and get crosses into the box. And both, to varying degrees, are more than capable of that. But you can, I hope, see Dilrosun is going to be a really good player for us, I hope, and is a real step up on what we've previously been working with. So that's our left-sided attacking winger role. Let's go and have a look at our two first-choice strikers for the lone striker role that we play. So the third striker, I mentioned that we had a third striker, is the youngster Eric R that was here last season. He's developing decently enough. Don't really need to show you him at this point just because he hasn't changed too much, but he'll be our third striker just for injuries and, you know, if we play in cup games that have got really low oppositions, etc. He's a good young 18-year-old that is improving a little bit, has got a little bit more determination than Sears Blattner has. Sears Laban, whatever his name is, sorry. So yes, he's progressing, but he'll play as the third option in our strikers. So the main two, here they are. You can see that, again, we retain one and we bring a new one in. So the retention is Barbosa, still on a loan, but for a second season. He did well enough for us last season to want to have another look at him. He hasn't maybe started so well this season, but, you know, that's okay. The alternative, again, is a loan. I couldn't quite find the striker I wanted to bring in full time, but this is an extremely good loan option. I think this duo between them should get goals for us, which is really positive. The reason he's got 3 goals in basically one game and such a high rating is that he played with our second 11 in our cup game against some low league opposition, and we scored like 8 goals or whatever it was. So in that one game, that's why he's looking so positive. Barbosa has come in and played the 2 games against our 2 hard league oppositions, hasn't really done much himself, but as I say, collectively as a team, we played quite well to get 2 decent draws out of 2 hard teams. So you can see in terms of their attribute graph, they're fairly similar. We've got a little bit more of an aerial threat from Batshuayi, which is a positive alternative to bring in terms of how we play for him, because our wide men will be hopefully getting decent amount of crosses in at times during our season. But other than the aerial, they're both very similar in terms of what they bring, and their quality is decent enough. You can see that both have got decent finishing. First touch is very good. It's interesting that if we go back and it says that his aerial is better, it is, but it's still not magnificent. But, you know, that's just the way it is. Jumping reach helps in that regard compared to what both Barbosa's got. Collectively, those 2 stats, the jumping reach and the heading, help to make up that stat. So, you know, he's not brilliant in the air, but he's better. But the rest of it are fairly even, I would suggest. You know, their physicals are both pretty good. 1 or 2 bits maybe more for Batshuayi. In terms of their mental attributes, Batshuayi got a couple of key ones in terms of anticipation is a little bit stronger, and bravery is good for, you know, getting his head on the ball. Composure is better in terms of taking his shots and being accurate with them. They've both got a bit of flair. You can see that the off the ball Barbosa heads that stat a little bit, and so, you know, they've got decent enough mentals, good physicals. And the way that we play, they've both got decent finishing, they've both got decent first touch. And I think both combined, collectively, one or the other, should get goals for us as we go through the season with the better players that we now have, I would suggest, supporting them from wide areas and just behind them in the central midfield. So I'm happy with these 2. I would, at some point, hopefully, either in January or in the summer, like to make either one of these more permanent if they're doing well and bring them into the club full time, or find that one striker that we can actually go and buy and make our own rather than working on loan players. We have had to bring again in more loan players that I would like in general terms. If we go and have a look at our full squad now, you can see that's not the page that I want in the way that I wanted. That's the one I want. But you can see the blue is our loan players, and we've eliminated them from our defence. We had a couple of loan players last season, but we've had to bring them in elsewhere for the quality. When people like Dill Rossen came up, I wasn't necessarily looking to improve that particular part of our team too much, but when he came up, I took him because he was a really good option. So yes, hopefully as we move forward, one or two of these will turn into permanent players or new players for us that we can buy in. But the makeup of our squad is better. You can see star ratings, although I don't hold too much sway against them, they've improved quite a bit over the time. And yeah, I'm really happy with the makeup of this squad. I think it can achieve what we've set out to achieve, which is to finish in and around the 10th, 11th sort of spot in the season. Our finances overall budget and balance, whatever B word I want to use, the balance is very positive because of all the prize money that we bought in last season. You can see that we've used all the transfer budget and we've got a little bit of excess for the wage budget, but not too much. In terms of the rest of the setup of the club, you can see we've got some very positive coaching going on, which is really good. We've filled out a lot more of those spaces now and got some very good ratings from them. So the club in general is looking very healthy. I'm really positive about what we can achieve this season. I think we'll leave it there for this episode because I've droned on enough, but you've now got a proper introduction to all of our players. You can see how we want to play. I will just show you the, not that one, the tactics page, and go in and just show you that we will be playing the controlled possession a little bit, but we've got two alternatives. One is the fluid counter-attack, where we can soak up some pressure and use our pace on the wide to counter-attack. And the third option is to play more specifically to the wide players in a more attacking, positive way, and use the quality that we have there. But primarily, what I want us to do this season is hold on to the ball a bit better, slow the pace down a little bit and control the games a little bit more, and see if we can impose our style onto the opposition a little bit more than we have done, and see if that gets us some results. So yeah, that'll do it for this episode. Thanks for joining me. I hope it wasn't too dull going through them all, but it was worthwhile having a look through all of our players. Next episode, we will come back and we will play Arminian Bielefeld and Schalke. We'll play a double header in the next episode and really get into our season and see where it takes us. But yeah, that's the end of this episode. Thanks for joining me. I will see you very soon. Thanks very much for watching this episode of the United City Randomiser Save. If you enjoyed the video, then why not click on the like button, as that would really help me. If you think you know anyone who would really enjoy my Football Manager content, then feel free to share this with them. But most importantly, if you would like to join my United City here on YouTube, then hit that subscribe button to stay up to date with my video releases. If you have anything you want to say about the United City Save or the channel itself, then feel free to leave a comment below, but please try and be nice with each other. That'll do for today, so until next time, stay happy and healthy, and I will see you soon.